It was a humid afternoon in Rosario when I first saw the envelope. A pile of fan letters had just arrived at the offices of the Argentine Football Association, most of them glittered with stickers, hearts, and messy handwriting from children across the globe. I'd been working there for only 6 months, buried deep in administrative tasks, but that day something unusual caught my eye. Unlike the others, this envelope was plain, unmarked except for a return address, Marseille, France. The letter might have ended up in the discard bin like countless others, but instinct made me pause. I opened it. Inside was a simple note, written in pencil. The handwriting was small, shaky, uneven. Dear Lionel Messi, my name is Karim. I am 11 years old. I live in Marseille. I am sick, very sick. The doctors say I don't have many games left. But if I could play just one with you, even for 5 minutes, I think I could smile forever. No request for a signed jersey. No selfie. No bragging. Just one sentence etched in a way that made my throat tighten. He didn't ask to meet a hero. He wanted to play. And something about the way he wrote, many games left, instead of days, crushed me that I should have sent the letter through official channels. That's what protocol demanded. But I knew what would happen. It would get lost in a PR maze, or worse, politely ignored. So instead, I folded the letter carefully, placed it in my bag, and left the office early. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city pulsed around me as I stared at the ceiling. The thought of that boy's letter sat on my chest like a stone. The next morning, without permission and with nothing but determination, I booked a one-way flight to Miami. Lionel Messi was playing for Inter Miami now. I'd never met him. Never even seen him in person. He was a monument in motion, untouchable. But I knew where he trained. And I was going to try that. I arrived on a sweltering Wednesday, Florida heat wrapping around me like wet gauze. I stood at the gates of the training facility, letter clutched in my pocket. Security eyed me suspiciously. I lied, said I was an assistant with the Argentine Federation. Technically true. They let me wait. Hours passed. Players came and went. And then, without fanfare, he appeared. Messi. He wasn't glowing. He wasn't floating. He looked tired. Human. But his presence stopped the world. I walked toward him, pulse pounding. I didn't rehearse a speech. I just handed him the letter. He looked at it. Then at me. Did you read it? He asked. Yes, I said. That he nodded once. Then folded the letter again and put it in his bag. Where is he? That was all. He didn't ask for press. He didn't check his schedule. He didn't ask if the boy was famous. He just asked where. And that was the moment I realized something powerful. This wasn't about a football legend answering a letter. It was about a man who understood the value of time, and just like that, Messi said, "Tell him I'm coming." But the story, of course, was only beginning. We landed in Marseille under a sky so gray it felt borrowed from another season. The wind off the Mediterranean carried the scent of salt and memory. I hadn't even unpacked when my phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number. He's awake today. Room 412. North Children's Hospital. The hospital stood like a silent fortress overlooking the city. Inside, the halls were lined with faded murals of animals and balloons, as if paint could protect children from what medicine sometimes couldn't. I found Karim's room by following the sound of laughter, surprisingly. It wasn't loud, but it was real. A laugh that rose and fell like it knew how rare it was. He was smaller than I expected, bones too sharp for an 11-year-old. But his eyes were stadium lights. Are you the guy? He asked as I entered. What guy? The one who gave my letter to Messi. I smiled. I suppose I am. He didn't ask anything more. He just leaned back, tired again. Machines beeped steadily in the background. And then, barely a whisper, do you think he'll really come? I don't think, I said. I know. 3 days passed. Karim's condition shifted like weather, moments of sun, sudden storms. I visited daily, always finding new drawings on the wall, one of Messi with angel wings, one of a football on fire, and one of a stick figure boy standing next to a bearded giant in pink. That one made my chest ache. Then on the fourth morning, the city trembled, not from an earthquake, but from wordless anticipation. It began with a nurse sprinting down the corridor. Then a doctor adjusting his tie like a student before an exam. Then I heard it, the hush of footsteps, measured and unmistakable. Messi was in the building, not as a performer. Not as a superstar. Just as a man who had made a promise that I walked with him through the pediatric wing. He said nothing. Didn't look at his phone. He carried only a bag, the kind footballers use for boots, and in it, I knew, was something more precious. When he stepped into Karim's room, the boy blinked twice as if trying to wake himself. His mouth opened but no sound came. Messi walked up, placed the bag gently on the edge of the bed, and said, "I'm here for our match." Karim didn't cry. He smiled. A full, reckless, impossible smile that lit the room brighter than any sun. And as Messi unpacked 2 small jerseys and a soft ball, I stepped outside. Some moments aren't meant to be observed. They're meant to be remembered. From the hallway I could hear it, the rhythmic thump of the ball against the hospital floor, the shuffle of socks on linoleum, and the laughter, not just Karim's, but Messi's too. A laugh not captured by cameras, not owned by sponsors, just a boy and a man. Playing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. No one interrupted. Not doctors. Not staff. Not time, and when it ended, Messi sat beside Karim, held his hand for a long moment, and whispered something I never heard, but I saw the way Karim looked at him, not like a fan, not like a patient, but like a teammate. As if they'd just won something no one else could see, and maybe they had. The next morning, Marseille felt different. Not because the skies had cleared, they hadn't, but because something unspoken now floated through the air. News hadn't broken. No headlines had shouted, "Messi visits dying boy," and that was intentional. No cameras had followed him, no PR team had accompanied him. He had arrived in silence and left the same way. And yet, inside that hospital, everyone walked a little slower. Spoke a little softer. Smiled a little easier. That I returned to the hospital, not out of duty but because I didn't know where else to be. When I walked into Karim's room, he was already drawing again. This time, it was a stadium. But not just any stadium, it was his street. His cracked sidewalks, the crooked lamppost, and in the middle, 2 tiny figures, one with hair like lightning bolts, the other with a crown. "You made yourself the king?" I asked, nodding to the crown. That he grinned. He said I played like one. I sat down, speechless. That wasn't flattery. Messi didn't give compliments like change. If he said it, he meant it. Karim went on, explaining every line of the picture, his voice stronger than the day before. The boy who could barely lift his arms 2 weeks ago now gestured like a commentator reliving a World Cup final. Hope, it seemed, was its own medicine, but later that evening, as I stepped into the hospital courtyard, the head nurse approached me. "We need to prepare," she said, her voice calm but solemn. "This is temporary. The disease hasn't changed." I knew she was right. But something inside me rebelled. I wanted to believe what had happened in that room, those 10 minutes of magic, had bent the laws of biology. That Messi's presence had rewritten fate. But the truth lingered in her eyes. Karim's clock hadn't stopped. It had only slowed. Back at the hotel, I called Buenos Aires. My supervisor answered on the 3rd ring. "You've been gone 2 weeks, he said coldly. "I know. You disappeared without clearance. You lied to security. I know. You're probably going to lose your job. I know." There was silence. Then he asked, "Was it worth it?" And I told him the truth, every second. I thought that would be the end of it, but the next morning, I received a message: "Stay as long as you need." The next day, Messi returned. No fanfare again. No entourage. Just him, in a hoodie, carrying another bag. This time, he brought cleats. Not for him, for Kareem. Soft-bottom indoor shoes, custom-made, with the number 10 stitched into the heel. Kareem stared at them like sacred relics. I want to try something, Messi said, with the hospital's cautious blessing. We moved a few beds from a disused therapy room. Nurses taped a small goal to the far wall. And there, on a vinyl floor beneath flickering lights, Messi coached Kareem through tiny drills. Pass, stop, pass back. Again. And again. Kareem's legs trembled, but he didn't fall. Messi never raised his voice, never hurried him. Just steady encouragement, soft praise. Perfect. Again. Beautiful. You'd think he was coaching in the Champions League. Maybe he was, only this pitch was smaller, and the stakes far greater, and then came the moment. Messi tapped the ball to Kareem and said, "Now, take the shot." Kareem stared at the plastic goal, hesitated, then ran forward. Not a sprint, more of a determined shuffle. But he swung his leg, and the ball skidded across the floor, bouncing gently off the bottom corner. Goal. Messi raised both arms like he'd just won the World Cup. And Kareem? He roared that it echoed through the entire wing. Doctors peeked in. Patients clapped from down the hall. And in that instant, Kareem wasn't sick. He wasn't fragile. He was a footballer. He was the kid on the street. He was alive. Afterward, Messi knelt beside him, sweat on his brow. "That's your goal," he said. "Forever." Kareem looked at him, a mix of awe and disbelief. "You'll remember it?" Messi smiled. "I've scored hundreds. But that one I'll never forget." That night, I sat outside the hospital, watching the last of the light disappear behind the rooftops. Messi had left quietly once again. But something he said lingered in my mind, a sentence I hadn't expected to hear. As he exited the hospital, he turned to me and said, "You should tell people about him." "Not about me." "Him." I asked, "What should I say?" He paused, thoughtful. Then simply, "Tell them he played." I didn't go home. Not right away. Not even when I received the official message from the Federation that my leave was extended, pending review. I couldn't leave, not with things as they were. Kareem's energy had surged, but his body still fought a losing battle. You could see it in the way his fingers trembled at night, or how he sometimes winced even while laughing, but something else changed too. His room was no longer just a hospital room. It had become a kind of shrine. Nurses began taping drawings to the walls, not out of duty, but pride. Visitors came by more often, not out of pity, but curiosity. The boy who played with Messi. The kid who scored the goals seen by no cameras, but remembered by every soul present. On the third week, Kareem handed me a folded sheet of paper. "For him," he said. Inside was another letter, written shakily but with a deliberate care. "Dear Leo, I don't think I'll play again. But that's okay, you gave me the match I wanted, you made me feel like more than a fan, you made me feel like a player. Now, I want you to promise me something, keep playing. For those who never got the chance." I read it twice before folding it, unsure whether to deliver it now or wait. The boy was fading in brightness but deepening in spirit. There was a wisdom to him now, the kind only children who've seen too much too soon carry. Then, on a Wednesday I won't forget, Messi returned one last time. He didn't go to the room first. He found me outside, in the quiet alcove between the potted olive trees. I handed him the letter. He didn't read it immediately, he just held it in his hand like something breakable. "How is he?" "Smaller," I said. Messi nodded. "But still playing?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When he entered the room, Kareem lit up again. But this time, there was no ball. No drills. No energy to run or pass. The boy barely raised his arms. But when Messi sat beside him, their hands found each other naturally, quietly. Kareem had a new drawing beside him, two silhouettes walking away from a stadium into the stars. "I made this," he whispered. Messi smiled and pointed. That one's you. Karim grinned weakly. I hoped you'd say that. They talked for nearly an hour. Not about goals or trophies or stadiums. About pets. About favorite colors. About what clouds looked like from an airplane. Messi shared stories about flying over Argentina at sunset. Karim told him about the pigeon that once snuck into his classroom and caused a full-on panic. They laughed. It was strange and pure and terrible in its beauty, because we all knew it was the last time. When it came time to leave, Messi stood slowly. He placed his hand gently on Karim's shoulder, then removed something from around his neck. It was a necklace, a small metal pendant, worn and scuffed. This, he said, was a gift when I was a kid. From someone who believed I could be more than I was. I think it's time I passed it on. Karim blinked slowly. But what if I don't get to keep it long? Messi leaned down, eyes level. Then it'll stay with you. Forever. There were no goodbyes. No speeches. Just one final look between them. And then he left. 3 days later, Karim was gone. That I was there when it happened. The monitors didn't wail. They just slowed. Like a song easing to its last note. His mother held one hand. I held the other. And on his chest, resting above his heart, was Messi's pendant. The funeral was quiet. Small. But as we stood beneath a sky smeared with morning gray, a ripple of motion caught my eye. Across the cemetery lawn, a man stood apart from the group. Hood up. Hands folded. Messi didn't approach. Didn't speak. He only watched from a distance, head slightly bowed. And when the casket finally lowered, he turned and walked away. It wasn't until I returned to my hotel that I saw the message he'd left on my phone. He kept his promise. Now I'll keep mine. A week later, the world saw something new. Inter Miami walked out for their next home game wearing black armbands. Not for a player. Not for a coach. For a boy in Marseille who had once asked for 5 minutes of joy in the 10th minute, Messi scored, but instead of raising his hands or running to the crowd, he pointed to the sky, then tapped his chest where a pendant used to rest. No one else knew what it meant, but I did, and I always will. The story didn't end with a funeral. Not really. Stories like Karim's don't disappear, they echo. They settle in the spaces between headlines, in the quiet of early mornings, in the hearts of those who witnessed something unrepeatable. A month after his passing, I returned to Buenos Aires. The city was alive, as it always had been, loud with buses and debates and Sunday football in every corner. But I had changed. The streets looked the same, but my pace had slowed. I was still technically employed, but something inside me had broken free of bureaucracy. I could no longer see forms and meetings as anything more than noise. I brought the drawings back with me, Karim's stadiums, his superheroes, the boy with the crown. I hung them on the wall above my desk, a reminder not just of him, but of what happens when you act against the grain. When you break protocol to follow something real. About 2 weeks later, I got a call. Messi wants to meet, the voice said. Privately. The address they gave me wasn't an office or a stadium. It was a modest training facility on the outskirts of the city, one of those quiet academies built for young players, the kind most fans never see. I arrived in the late afternoon. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the pitch. I waited near the bleachers until I saw him. Messi arrived alone, dressed simply in a gray shirt and dark joggers, a water bottle in hand. He nodded once as he approached. No entourage. No fanfare. Just a man who carried the silence of someone who had lived many lives in one. Come, he said. I want to show you something. We walked together past the training field, down a narrow path behind the buildings. And there it was, a small room under renovation, the windows newly fitted, the walls still raw. This will be the first, he said. A classroom. But not for algebra. For something else. I looked around. The space was simple, but carried intention. For what? He smiled. For remembering. He told me his plan, or rather, his promise. Not just to play for Karim, but to build something lasting. A network of small centers across Latin America, where kids with no future in football, or in life, could come and feel like they mattered. They'd learn to play, yes, but more than that, they'd learn to hope. Not everyone will be a champion, he said. But they can all feel like one. The program would be called Juego de Honor, the game of honor, and the first name on the wall, he asked, already knowing I'd understand, Karim. That night, we sat on the edge of the empty field. The city buzzed somewhere far away, but here there was only wind and the faint scent of grass. He asked me to tell him everything I remembered, Karim's stories, his humor, the way he looked when he scored that goal. And as I spoke, Messi didn't interrupt once. He just listened. Not like a celebrity being polite, but like a friend holding something sacred. When I finished, he looked ahead and said, "People forget that we were all kids once. That someone once gave us a chance." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something familiar, a tiny drawing, folded many times. I recognized it instantly. It was the one of the stadium made of Karim Street. "He gave this to me," Messi said. "I'm keeping it." Later that year, Inter Miami held a silent tribute at their home stadium. Before kickoff, one seat in the front row was left empty. On it sat a jersey, tiny, child-sized, with the number 10 stitched on the back and a crown drawn above the name, Karim. Messi didn't point to it. Didn't call attention to it. But when he scored in the 73rd minute, he walked straight to that seat, placed both hands on the jersey, and whispered something only the wind could carry. No news outlet explained it. No commentator had the context. But it didn't matter. Back in Marseille, the North Children's Hospital renamed their playroom. A brass plaque now reads, "The Field of Dreams," in honor of Karim, who played with the greatest, and in Buenos Aires, the walls of the small academy are now filled with photos of kids, barefoot, laughing, dribbling uneven balls, none of them famous, none of them rich. But in every face, you can see the spark that I still work at the Federation. Technically. But my desk has changed. I run a new department now, unofficially titled Project 412, after the hospital room where it all began. Our mission isn't to find talent. It's to find forgotten letters. Hidden voices. Kids like Karim, who ask for nothing but a game. Sometimes I get calls from parents who don't believe it's real. "You mean Messi actually visited a boy in Marseille?" "Yes," I tell them. "He did." "Why him?" "Because he asked." They usually fall silent after that, and I like that silence, because it means they're thinking, "The last time I spoke with Messi, he said something I never wrote down, but it's branded in my mind." "We all want to be remembered," he said. But sometimes, the most beautiful memory isn't yours. It's the one you give to someone else. And that, I've come to believe, is the most lasting legacy, not the trophies, not the goals. But the day a legend became a teammate, and a boy became a player, even if only for 5 minutes, even if only once, forever.